Every day Marcus Coleman walked the streets of this city. A father. A husband. A man who carried the weight of 1,000 silent judgments. To the world he was just another black man in a navy jacket and sneakers. But to those who knew him he was a force. A dreamer. A fighter. This is the story of one ordinary evening that became a battle for dignity, and how Marcus turned the tables in a way no one could have predicted. The city street buzzed with life at dusk. The golden light of the setting sun spilled across the pavement, casting long shadows that danced with the rhythm of passing cars. The air was thick with the hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, and the faint clink of coins in a street performer's guitar case. Marcus Coleman, a black man in his late 30s, walked with purpose, his steps steady but unhurried. His navy jacket was slightly worn at the cuffs, his jeans faded but clean. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a quiet weight, like someone who'd seen too much but refused to break. It was a Thursday and Marcus had one goal: find a suit for his daughter's school fundraiser. Nothing fancy, just something sharp. Something to make his little girl proud. But as he stepped into Harper's department store, he felt it. That familiar chill. The kind that comes when you know you're being watched. Judged. Reduced to the color of your skin. The store was a cathedral of luxury. Marble floors gleamed under bright fluorescent lights, reflecting the sparkle of glass counters lined with designer watches, colognes, and leather wallets. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, mingling with the faint scent of expensive perfume that hung in the air. Shoppers moved with ease, their arms laden with bags, their voices light with privilege. Marcus headed toward the men's clothing section, his hands in his pockets, scanning the racks of suits. Navy or black, he thought. Something classic. Marcus didn't come here often. Places like Harper's weren't his usual haunt. But his daughter, Aisha, deserved a father who showed up looking his best. So he pushed past the unease, ignored the glances from other shoppers, and focused on the task at hand. A suit. That's all he needed. But trouble? It was already waiting. Marcus picked up a navy blazer, running his fingers over the smooth fabric. He checked the price tag, steep but manageable. Across the aisle, a white sales associate, Karen, watched him. She was in her 40s, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her name tag pinned perfectly to her blazer. Her lips pursed slightly and she adjusted her glasses, her posture stiffening. Nearby, another employee, a younger white man named Tyler, leaned against a counter, his arms crossed. He whispered something to Karen and she nodded, her eyes narrowing as they settled on Marcus. Marcus didn't need to hear their words to know what they were thinking. He'd been here before. The assumption. The suspicion. To them, he wasn't a customer with a wallet and a purpose. He was a threat. A problem. Someone who didn't belong in their polished world of marble and jazz. Karen approached, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The sound cut through the soft music, drawing the attention of a few shoppers. Her smile was tight, more a formality than a welcome, and her eyes flicked over Marcus's jacket and sneakers, lingering just long enough to betray her thoughts. "Excuse me, sir," Karen said, her voice polite but edged with something colder. "Can I help you find something? Or are you just browsing?" Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a flicker of weariness in his eyes. "Just looking for a suit. Something for a school event. Navy or black, maybe?" Karen raised an eyebrow, her smile thinning. "Oh, I see. Well, those blazers are quite expensive. We have some more affordable options in the clearance section if you'd like me to show you." Marcus's hand tightened briefly on the blazer before relaxing. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm good here, thanks." Karen hesitated, her fingers twitching at her side. She nodded curtly and walked back to the counter, her heels clicking faster now. She leaned toward Tyler, whispering something. Tyler chuckled, his eyes darting toward Marcus. The store felt smaller, the air heavier, the jazz grating against the growing tension. Karen's words were polite, but her tone? It was a blade, sharp and precise. To her, Marcus didn't belong in this store. Not with those sneakers. Not with that skin. And she wasn't the only one watching. Near the store's entrance, a security guard, Officer Daniels, stood with his arms crossed. He was a burly white man in his 50s, his uniform crisp, his badge glinting under the lights. His eyes were locked on Marcus, unblinking, like a predator sizing up its prey. The radio on his belt crackled softly, and he adjusted it, never breaking his stare. Officer Daniels had worked security at Harper's for 15 years. He prided himself on keeping things in order. To him, order meant control. And Marcus? Marcus was a disruption. A man who didn't fit the profile of Harper's usual clientele. A problem waiting to happen. Marcus moved to another rack, picking up a silk tie, its deep blue catching the light. He held it up, imagining how it would look with the blazer. Daniels started walking toward him, his boots thudding heavily on the marble floor. The sound echoed, drowning out the jazz. Shoppers glanced over, then quickly looked away, sensing the shift in the air. "Hey buddy," Daniels said, his voice gruff. "You planning to buy something, or you just here to look around?" Marcus turned slowly, his expression unreadable. The store's light seemed brighter now, almost blinding, casting harsh shadows across Daniels' face. "I'm shopping," Marcus said. "Same as everyone else." Daniels stepped closer, his bulk filling the space between them. His voice dropped, low and menacing. "Yeah. Well, we've had some issues with shoplifting lately. Just making sure everything's above board." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his eyes remained steady. His fingers brushed the tie, grounding him as the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken accusations. Around them, the store seemed to hold its breath. A woman nearby adjusted her purse, her eyes darting nervously. A man in a suit hurried past, pretending not to notice. Every word from Daniels was a jab. A reminder. You don't belong. Marcus could feel the weight of it, the store, the stares, the assumptions. He'd faced this before in countless stores, offices, streets. But tonight it stung deeper. Because all he wanted was a suit. A simple suit for his daughter's fundraiser. So why did it feel like he was on trial? Daniels lingered, pretending to check a display but keeping Marcus in his peripheral vision. Karen hovered at the counter, her fingers tapping nervously on the glass. Tyler, still smirking, pulled out his phone and started recording, angling it toward Marcus. The red light blinked, capturing every move Marcus made. The air was thick now, like a storm about to break. Marcus could have walked away. He could have let it go like he'd done so many times before. But something in him refused. Not tonight. Not here. Marcus picked up the suit jacket and headed toward the fitting rooms, his steps deliberate. Karen intercepted him, her voice sharp, her smile gone. "Sir, I'll need to check that jacket before you take it in." "Store policy." Marcus stopped, looking at her. His eyes flicked to the other shoppers, none of whom were being stopped or checked. A white woman walked past with a pile of clothes, her arms full, her face unbothered. A man in a polo shirt carried a stack of shirts, unnoticed. "Is that policy for everyone?" Marcus said, his voice calm but pointed. "Or just me?" Karen flushed, her smile faltering. She glanced at Daniels, who stepped closer, his hand resting on his radio. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, pal," Daniels said. "Just hand over the jacket." The tension peaked, the store's lights glinting off Daniels' badge, the faint tremor in Karen's hands, the smirk on Tyler's face as he recorded. Marcus stood still, the suit jacket draped over his arm, his breathing steady but his eyes burning with quiet defiance. Shoppers slowed, their whispers growing louder. The jazz music faded into the background, replaced by the thud of Marcus's heartbeat. This wasn't about a jacket. It wasn't about shoplifting. It was about power. About who gets to belong and who gets to be questioned. Marcus knew it. And so did they. Daniels reached for the jacket, his fingers brushing the fabric. But before he could grab it, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He held up a finger, his voice firm but calm. "1 second. I need to take this." Daniels scoffed, his hand hovering. "You're testing my patience, buddy?" Marcus stepped back, pulling out his phone. He answered, his expression shifting from calm to focused as he listened. "Yeah, I'm here," he said. "Go ahead and send the team over. I'll meet them in 20. He hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The store was silent now, the jazz barely audible. Karen's hands froze on the counter. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his confidence wavering. Tyler lowered his phone, his smirk fading, the red light still blinking. They didn't know it yet, but the ground was shifting. Marcus Coleman wasn't just a man shopping for a suit. He was someone they never expected. Someone with power they couldn't imagine. Marcus turned to Daniels, his voice steady but laced with authority. "You're gonna want to step back, officer. I'm not here to steal anything. I'm here to buy a suit, and maybe something else." Daniels blinked, caught off guard. Karen stepped back, her eyes wide. Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, handing it to Daniels. The card was simple, elegant, with bold black text. Marcus Coleman, CEO, Coleman Enterprises. Marcus Coleman wasn't just a customer. He was the new owner of Harper's department store. The deal had closed that morning, a quiet acquisition that hadn't yet made the local news. Marcus had wanted to see the store for himself. To walk its floors as a customer, not a boss. To feel its pulse. And what he felt was shame. Daniels read the card, his jaw tightening. His hand dropped from his radio, his face paling. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, her hands trembling. Tyler's phone slipped from his grip, clattering to the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Mr. Coleman," Daniels stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I was just." Marcus cut him off, his voice low but unyielding. "You were just doing your job? Is that what you call it? Following me? Questioning me? Assuming I'm a thief because of how I look?" Karen tried to interject, her voice shaky. "Sir, I'm so sorry. It's just store policy." "Policy?" Marcus said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Or prejudice? Because I didn't see you checking anyone else's clothes." "Not her." He nodded toward the woman with the pile of clothes. "Not him." He pointed to the man in the polo shirt, now at the checkout. "Just me." The shoppers around them were silent now, their whispers replaced by wide-eyed stares. The store felt smaller, the air heavy with the weight of Marcus's words. Karen's face flushed red, her hands gripping the counter. Daniels shifted his weight, his badge suddenly feeling heavier. For the first time, Daniels and Karen felt what Marcus had felt his whole life. The weight of judgment. The sting of being seen as less. And they were terrified. Marcus stepped closer to Daniels, his voice calm but cutting. "You think you're protecting this store? You're not. You're hurting it. You're hurting people. And that stops today." He turned to Tyler, who stood frozen, his face pale, his phone still on the floor. "And you," Marcus said, "recording me like I'm some kind of spectacle? That video's going viral, but not the way you think." The shoppers began to murmur again, their phones now out, recording the scene. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall, the suit jacket still over his arm, his presence commanding the room. Daniels took a step back, his hands raised slightly as if surrendering. Karen's eyes darted to the floor, her confidence shattered. Marcus could have walked away. He could have humiliated them. But he wasn't here for revenge. He was here for change. The next morning, Marcus stood in the store's conference room, addressing a group of employees. The room was stark, with white walls and a long table, the fluorescent lights casting a clinical glow. Daniels and Karen sat near the back, their heads bowed, their faces etched with shame. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it he'd quit before the meeting began. Marcus's voice was steady as he outlined new policies. Mandatory bias training, revised hiring practices, a zero-tolerance stance on discrimination. He spoke of accountability, of rebuilding trust with customers, of making Harper's a place where everyone felt welcome. The employees listened, some nodding, others taking notes. Daniel stared at his hands, his fingers tracing the edge of his badge. Karen's eyes were red, her glasses fogged with unshed tears. Marcus didn't fire Daniels or Karen. He could have. Most would have. But he believed in second chances. Not out of weakness but out of strength. He knew firing them wouldn't fix the problem. The problem was bigger than two people. It was a system. A culture. And Marcus was here to change it. The store began to transform. New signs went up, proclaiming a commitment to inclusivity. Employees underwent training, their faces a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Customers noticed the difference. Smiles were warmer, interactions fairer. Harper's wasn't just a store anymore. It was a symbol of what could be. Weeks later, Marcus stood at the school fundraiser, wearing the navy suit he'd bought that night. The community center was alive with laughter, music, and the clink of glasses. Aisha, his 10-year-old daughter, beamed as he adjusted her bow tie, her eyes sparkling with pride. The crowd clapped as Marcus took the stage, his presence commanding but warm. He spoke of education, of community, of building a future where every child felt seen. The audience hung on his words, their applause echoing long after he stepped down. Marcus's victory wasn't just personal. It was systemic. He didn't just change one store. He changed the way people think, the way they act. He showed that power isn't about revenge, it's about accountability, about hope. And that's the kind of power that lasts. This story is inspired by real events. Discrimination happens every day. But so does change. Be part of it. They mocked his skin color. They underestimated him. But Marcus Coleman showed them who he really was. And in doing so, he showed us all what's possible. If this story resonated with you, share it. Let's start the conversations that lead to change. Subscribe for more stories that inspire justice.